What if I told you that the entire United States, all of it, runs on a single rulebook? A document that was written over 200 years ago, but it still decides everything, from who runs the country to the rights you and I have every single day. Well, today, we're going to break down that very rulebook, the U.S. Constitution.
So let's just start with a really basic question. What do you think is the single most important rulebook in all of America? The one document that lays out all the big, fundamental rules for the entire country.
If you were thinking about the Constitution, then you are absolutely right. Because at its heart, that's really all it is. It's the official rulebook, the foundational playbook that tells the entire U.S. government how it's supposed to work.
Okay, so if it's a rulebook, who wrote the rules? Let's take a quick trip back in time and look at where this all started.
So picture this. It's 1787. America had just won its independence from Great Britain, which was amazing, but it created a huge problem. They needed a whole new government. So all the big leaders of the time, they got together in Philadelphia with one massive goal, to write the rule book for this brand new nation. And the people who wrote it, well, you've definitely heard of them. We call them the Founding Fathers. We're talking about heavy hitters like George Washington, James Madison, and Benjamin Franklin. And they had a really tough puzzle to solve. How do you build a government that's strong enough to actually run a country, but not so strong that it crushes the very freedoms they just fought a war to win?
So what does this rulebook actually do? Well, when you boil it all down, it basically has three really big jobs.
Yep, it all comes down to just three main functions. That's it.
First, it literally creates the government and sets up the whole structure. Second, and this is so important, it divides up the power, so no single person or group can have all the control. And third, it protects our rights from that government. Let's dig into that a little more.
Now, this idea of dividing power is pure genius. They split the government into three separate branches. You've got Congress, which makes the laws. You've got the president, who enforces the laws. And then you have the courts, who interpret the laws. It's like a three-way balancing act to make sure nobody gets too powerful.
You can think of it like a system of checks and balances. Each branch can put the brakes on the others. This is the key safety feature they built right into the system, all designed to make sure no one part of the government could ever take over.
And that brings us to the third big job, protecting our rights. This was such a huge deal that they added the first 10 changes or amendments almost right away. We call this the Bill of Rights, and its entire job is to list out the basic freedoms the government can never take away from you.
And we're talking about the big ones, right? The freedom to say what you think, the freedom to practice any religion you choose, and the right to a fair trial if you're accused of a crime. These aren't just suggestions, they're written down guarantees.
But hold on, the world back in 1787? There was no internet, no cars, not even electricity in most places. So that brings up a really important question. Is this ancient rulebook just stuck in the past, completely set in stone?
So let's ask it plainly. After all this time, can the Constitution actually be changed?
And the answer is a huge, definite yes. The people who wrote it were smart, but they knew they couldn't predict the future. They had no idea what challenges America would face down the road.
So they built in an upgrade button, a way to make official changes called amendments. This is exactly why people call the Constitution a living document. It was designed from the very beginning to be able to grow and adapt as the country changed over time. Pretty smart, right?
Okay, so we've talked about what it is, who wrote it, and how it works. But let's get to the bottom line. Why does this old piece of paper still matter so much to you and me today?
Well, it's basically the foundation for everything. It's what keeps the government playing fair, it's the shield that protects our rights, and ultimately, it's what creates a stable and orderly society where we all know the rules of the game.
One source really put it perfectly. Without it, the country would not have clear rules. And that might sound simple, but it's everything. It gives us a shared baseline, a sense of order that stops things from just falling into chaos.
And that leads to one last question for you to think about. Since we know the Constitution can be changed, if you had the power to add just one new rule, one new amendment to the nation's ultimate rulebook, what would it be? It's a tough one. Thanks so much for tuning in.